Is It Transphobic will be addressing issues of transphobia and transmisogyny.
We may also address issues of racism, classism, ableism, and various other intersectional issues in this podcast.
So this is a trigger warning.
The panelists on Is It Transphobic will also use strong language.
So listener discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, just wanted to give you a heads up. This is the audio from the live stream we did talking about Space Sweepers on Netflix. It is still on Netflix. It is a really fun movie. I definitely recommend everybody check it out. That said, if you are watching this on YouTube and you are not a Patreon subscriber, you are watching the version without the actual video. We are walling that off to Patreon subscribers exclusively. So even for just $1, you can get access to the video of Space Sweepers, as well as if we do another live stream. I don't know. I had fun. It was really cool. We've done live streams in the past and they've been a lot of fun. So if this is content that you would like to see, let us know and join our Patreon. Patreon.com/isitTransphobic. The other thing I wanted to warn you about is there is a little echo. We tried to solve it, and for the most part, it is solved. But there's a little bit of an echo on some of it. So FYI, there it is. Enjoy Space Sweepers. Nope, you don't need to see another 30 seconds. That's fine. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Lauren Rogers. I'm the creator and the producer of the Is It Transphobic podcast. We're about to go live. Like, we're already... You're watching us, you're seeing us go live. Wow, I'm normally able to cut these things out. That's the beauty of editing. But we can't do that today because we're live. Amazing. So I'm going to stop doing whatever it is that I'm doing at the moment and start bringing in my co-hosts today. So, hi, everyone. If you would, please tell the folks watching and listening your names, your pronouns, and yeah, we'll just jump right in.
Hi, I'm Emmet Asher-Perrin, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Sylas Barrett, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hello, Jonathan Alexandratos, and my pronouns are they, them.
Awesome. So I'm just going to get the ball rolling. I started watching this film because I heard from Emmet and Sylas, oh my gosh, you all need to watch this film. Oh my gosh, you all need to watch this film. Just in general, not specifically to me. And then Jonathan approached me and said, Ashley, we have to do this film. We have to talk about this film. So we'll get into what this film is in a moment, the film Space Sweepers, but I would love to hear how y'all came to find it. Like, what said to you, oh, I need to watch this film?
I heard it from Emmet.
We're all hearing it from Emmet. That's what it is.
No, that was so I'm the news and entertainment editor at Tora.com, and so I'm the person who's usually responsible for like getting all the trailers put up on the site. And that movie had been coming up all over the place for a while. So I basically kept seeing the trailers and was like, this looks like it's going to be really fun. And decided that when it came out, I'm also one of the primary film critics for the site. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I watch this when it comes out and I'm going to get a review done. And I was expecting to enjoy it. I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I think mostly because I really love sort of big, bombastic, action-y space operas, but I find that a lot of them they're not as exciting as they used to be. I think that they aren't. They're made by big corporations now, and they're all kind of doing the exact same thing. So I was really happy to see something that wasn't doing that.
And I live with them, so we're super married.
Yeah,
which means that I heard about it 3 or 4 times. Every time, so often they would be like, we should really watch that Space Sweepers movie. And I would say, what movie is that? And then they would tell me. And then 2 days later, they'd be like, do you want to watch Space Sweepers? And I'd be like, what is it? And they would tell me again, because we're married. But they were right. We needed to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, and Emmet, I read your review, and of course, you are someone who could tell me to watch someone just recite a phone book, and I'd be like, oh, Emmet said to do it. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. So I'll do it. But that's because your writing is so smart about these things that, like, probably wouldn't say that, unless it's warranted. But I watched it and I loved it. And Ashley, what I loved about our interaction on Space Sweepers was just I passed it along to you, and then you started watching it. I loved your text that was just like, "Oh, the robot got it." I'm just like, yeah.
It's so often whenever anyone tells me, "Hey, Ashley, you need to see this," or especially when it's explicitly, "Hey, we should do this for the podcast," and no one immediately jumps out like at first I was like, okay, is it the captain? Is it like, where is this going? I feel like Jonathan wouldn't be so like, we have to do this unless there's someone that's like explicitly trans, that's like definitely there, that's like, oh yeah. But
it's Macho Man. Macho Bubs. Oh yeah.
Snap into a Slim Jim. But yeah, and so it was just like, oh, it's the robot, isn't it? And then it was just like, yep, it's clearly the robot. So let's talk a little bit about Bubs. I will say I talked about Space Sweepers at length with my friend Rodney Brown on the Nerd Caliber podcast, and we talked a little bit about gender, and I talked a lot, which you can hear all of my hot takes, which are very bad hot takes in my own opinion. I think they're bad hot takes, but they're very much this like robot, yeah, that's the one. But I'd love to hear how you all felt about Bubs and sort of like seeing this character come into her own.
I think that's a really good point, that sort of the trans sort of, are they actually trans? Is it trans allegory? It's often an alien, a robot, like not just like a human that we would, say, oh, could also live today in our Earth. And that's certainly true. But there's something about it, and the sort of slow reveal that you meet Bubs, and the shape that they are and the sound of their voice is what we would, in society would say, oh, that's a man. And then you sort of get this reveal that you've made an assumption. And because it's a robot, something about it just highlights the ridiculousness of that assumption. Because you're like, well, why did I think that? I just heard some things and I said, that is definitely only how a man sounds. And I'm going to just sort of not interrogate my initial impulse and my initial read, which even trans people, even people who have done a lot of work unpacking, what society teaches us about sex and gender, we still do it. I was still, I didn't view that character as neutral until I was told otherwise. And so I think that it was powerful in that respect for me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Emmett.
I come from allegory obviously is not a stand-in for representation, but also I've been a science fiction person for so many years, and to me, robots are more human than humans are. Most of the time. So I have a tendency, I'm very empathetically linked into any character that's a robot. So when I found out when that happened in the film, when you get the reveal, I was like, oh good, it's the robot. I want it to be the robot. I always want it because I love robots so much. But also the thing that I thought was really interesting was when I put up the review, our first commenter, normally don't ever read the comments, but the first comment I got was from a native Korean speaker. And one of the things that I thought was super sweet was that they explained that if you're watching the film and you're watching it with English subtitles or dubbing, the reveal is Codename calls her lady. And she gets really excited that the kid has figured out that she's a lady. But apparently, if you speak Korean, the word that she uses is actually the word that a little girl would use to refer to her older sister.
Oh.
And I was like, language is beautiful and context is so important, and I wish I'd known that.
Yeah, I will also admit, and this is a thing that we should probably state, is that none of us are Korean, none of us are native Korean speakers. I do not speak Korean at all. So we are coming into this piece in some ways as people critiquing a film from another culture, but at the same time, there is so much in this film that feels, I said this on the Nerd Caliber podcast, it feels international, which is fascinating. I've never had that experience watching a film where it legitimately feels like an international effort.
Yeah. It's interesting, Emmett, that you mentioned that, because I watched the subtitles version as opposed to the dubbed version, and the word that I remember from that is sister, but that I didn't know the context about the older sister piece, and that felt deeply loving to me. I mean, the thing that I loved about Bubs is that if this is a pseudo Wizard of Oz kind of thing, and there's a lot, I think, to suggest that it at least has some influences there, then that's your Tin Man. And the idea that not a man, she's Bubs, that and that not only is she not a man, but the quest for a heart, which is the Tin Man's quest in The Wizard of Oz, is a quest for gender, is, I think, deeply beautiful, because to me it links this idea of finding gender to finding your heart, and I find that really compelling.
I just kind of got to sit with that. That's actually really beautiful. I'm like, yes. Yeah, I think that there's also I think that the film does such a really beautiful job. It is a very international effort at a time when people keep trying to make films like this and doing them not that well. And the thing that sort of struck me in watching it was that I'm watching this, in the context of having watched films recently like Elysium and like Valerian and like even, I mentioned this in the review, like, and Star Wars, and they keep doing all these things where they're like, we're showing all these different types of people. We're making, we're showing that we are all the same, and we're showing that we can all work together, and that we all need to recognize that the enemy is class issues, or it's the fact that we can't stop fighting over tiny things that don't make that much of a difference. And the films don't pull it off. Like, Valerian is, the best part of Valerian is the first 5 minutes. And then the rest of it kind of goes off the rails and doesn't really do what it needs to do. So to see a film that is, it is a Korean film that actually makes the effort to bring in so many different people from so many different places and succeeds, it kind of just makes you look at like what Western film is doing and going like, why are we doing this? What's going on, guys? Come on. We can make this better. We can do a better job. So, yeah.
And, one can say that it's like the whole idea of the over corporatization of the film industry, making it so that like it's got to be a guaranteed hit, and by trying to make it a guaranteed hit, it fails. And you see it all the time where it's like, oh, I can see the kernel of a good movie in this. Like very much like you were saying with Valerian, or very much like you were saying with even the new Star Wars movies. It was like, oh, I found myself really pulling for a lot of these new Star Wars movies. And then that last one happened. And it was just like, what? Okay, sure, I guess. Yeah.
It almost needs to come from a source that's totally detached from American nostalgia. Like what American, like US nostalgia is, that's what keeps getting dangled in front of us by filmmakers to get us to come back, because they think we'll feel the same as we did in 1986 when we saw Transformers. And it's not going to happen, because we are fundamentally different people. So if you take a film that comes from outside the US, like Space Sweepers, it's not trying to necessarily be plugged into that in the same way that a Michael Bay Transformers movie is trying to be plugged into that. And that makes it seem very refreshing, frankly, to us. It completely just makes me fall in love with it.
Yeah.
I do think that, I mean, the nostalgia thing is a huge thing, like on my end, because I deal with that stuff every day, and like if you're talking to anyone on the internet, but especially if you're talking to nerds, it's like everybody wants everything to feel exactly, they want the same experience, and you can't replicate it, and you can't make the same, I mean, people were critiquing things, like the third Star Wars trilogy for being derivative from the first film. And there are times when mimicry can be fun, and when you're sort of like reskinning and rezesting something and going like, okay, how do we recalibrate this for a modern audience? You can do really interesting stuff there. But ultimately, we are getting to a point where a lot of the stuff that we're seeing is being made. I've talked with this about this with people before. I was actually talking about it on a Mark Twain podcast a couple of weeks ago that just aired today as well. But it's like these stories are now getting made in labs. They're being made by committees. They're being made to appeal to the broadest swath of people. And when you do that, when you make something to appeal to the biggest group possible, you're going to lose all the nuance. You're going to lose all the specificity. And that's what ends up, that's why you end up getting stuff where you're like, and now Palpatine's back from the dead and everyone's going to get in a billion Star Destroyers and we're going to do this again.
If you want to know why Palpatine's back, you got to play Fortnite, though.
And he had a kid and no one wants to hear about that. No one wants to know anything about this.
So that's the thing. I mentioned anything and Jonathan has a toy. For those of you that are not part of our Patreon, you can't see the amazing toy or the amazing toys in general that Jonathan has behind them. But yeah, there will be a lot of toy references that you're missing out on because you're not paying $1 a month.
Speaking of a great property for toys, Space Sweepers. Oh my God. If there were toys of that ship and those people, holy cow. I would go
love
nuts.
That. Yeah. It would be so, and I love, the other thing, it's so like, obviously like we want to talk about Bubs, but the importance to me of seeing a little girl in a film who is like farting and messy and like a real child instead of like this fake thing that they can like keep telling people little girls are, was like, I was like, if I had seen that as a kid, when, I still like was like, I am a little girl because that's what everyone tells me I would have felt very comforted by that.
What was it? There's a Samantha Bee's husband who I can never remember the name of. He is on a show and it's amazing, The Detour. And his whole mentality when they were building the children was, these have to be like real, no, like, okay, we're parents and you always see these like, oh, the parents are assholes. And then like the kids are like, oh, here's a sarcastic quip. It's like, no, I have kids. Kids are assholes. So the kids that we're building are also assholes. It's kind of great. So yeah, like if you're going to put kids in a movie, let them be real. Let them feel real.
Yeah, yeah. In 2021, the tornado is inside Dorothy and she farts it.
Yes.
That's how we know.
Oh, God.
I feel like I need that as a cross on a pillow.
So my kind of extending on this idea of my hot take. I have a bad hot take, and I know it. I own it. My bad hot take is there's something about me that disconnects when a character is a robot or a character is an alien or a character is a whimsical fairy and they're the queer one and they're the only one that's like that is explicitly queer. And so for me, it is like, oh, for a lot of people that might be a way in, but for those same people, they're like, oh, that's a robot. Well, that's a toaster. And so, like, I always feel bad about that. Like, to me, Data is a toaster. I don't know what to tell you. I realize Data is artificial intelligent being.
A whole episode about that.
I know. I'm a monster. I'm a monster.
Pain on Emmett's face.
I recognize it. I recognize this, and I am open, and I am willing to come around on that. But there is a part in the reptile brain that is like, that's a toaster.
But you love toast. You love toast.
What's wrong with Toaster?
Little Toaster was a fantastic movie. Sorry, Sylas, say that again.
Is that what toasters do? They make bread? No, I don't know.
I don't make bread. Yeah, toasters, they make bread.
Just shove some dough in it.
I know what I'm talking about.
I mean, actually, it's funnier because, like, I mean, probably part of the reason that I love robots as much as I do. When I was a kid, I watched The Brave Little Toaster over and over and over. And I'm like, no, those appliances are people. They're people. And if you throw them away, you've killed something and you should feel bad.
I really feel that. Yeah.
Like I do think that that's a. I mean, I understand the actual sort of like the intellectual discussion of like we can't use allegory as a stand-in for representation, and that is a problem. And also the fact that the character is not being voiced by a trans woman, which is its own issue. But I do think I think that there is something. I think it might have something to do with when you like what science fiction stories you were exposed to when you were a kid and how they were formative and what they did to your brain. Because all the characters that I related to when I was really little, they were all like, when I was really, really tiny, like the first time I saw Star Wars, C-3PO was my favorite character. Like, I was like, people are boring. I like this cowardly gold robot. He's much better.
Yeah, he was the only character to have a cereal.
That's right.
He was.
Yeah, there's C-3POs for the original movie. Yeah, they were yeah. It's true, like Emmett, what you're saying, and Ashley, like what you're saying, like I also want to add to the validity of that take, because I do think it's important to be reminded of that. I think that my love for it definitely comes from a similar place maybe to Emmett's, where it stems from a childhood where I felt a lot of safety in those characters and I felt a lot of comfort by them. So to see it now, my intellectual brain goes, yes, we can break down the intellectual issues there, but my childhood, go back to nostalgia brain, is like, oh, but that's who we loved, and look, they're a little bit more like us now. Isn't that wonderful? So I think that's where the feelings are.
Yeah, and also, I mean, in science fiction, so often characters that are robots and characters that are aliens are deliberately supposed to stand in for, like, they are the most human. That's always like the point. Like, whatever the struggle is, you're going to use that character as a way. And it's not only true with queerness. It's been true for talking about feminism and talking about racism and talking about ableism, any other number of issues. They'll use the alien, they'll use the robot, they'll use the shapeshifter, they'll use and there are still issues with using that and making that the allegory. But if you are tapped into the rules, quote unquote, about how we do those things, you know that that's what they're for. You know that those characters are there to explore sides of humanity that we don't typically explore. And I think that makes a difference too.
Right. And once again, we're running into the problem that there's nothing wrong with a trans robot. It's just, why are they the only trans character? If there were several trans characters in the story, you know, it wouldn't be so important. Everything wouldn't be riding on this one person and how effective the message is, and whether or not we think that your average audience member feels like they can dismiss them because they're not a human being actually.
Yeah.
And I will say there were never any jokes at Bubs's expense about being a femme person in the body of, this is just the way that I'm choosing to describe it, like being a femme person in the body of essentially a male robot chassis. And like it was never anything other than respect. The only thing I will say that was hysterical up until I realized why Bubs was like gaining all that capital and trying to like take all the money, not take all the money, but like win all the money from Bubs's friends, was because Bubs was saving up to get this like human like prosthetic body for Bubs to feel more at home in Bubs's self. Which, like, I just thought it was hilarious that they kept taking Bubs's money whenever they needed to pay off.
And she's like, it's always my stuff. Why do we always have to take my money whenever you guys screw up?
I'm the only one who can save anything, and yet here we are.
The other thing that I really liked was I loved the fact that the indication that you get, like, so that the other crewmates don't know. But at the end of the film, like, she gets the chassis and they're like, they help her, deal with a guy who'd been shitty to her in the past. And what we see is that they're all completely like, no one has a problem with it. They just didn't know. And it's an issue because of the assumption. But the point was never, these people aren't going to accept it. They're going to think it's weird. They're going to think it's bad. It's just like, they made the unfortunate human assumption that we make around gender, and when they were corrected, they had no issue with it.
That's true. I also enjoyed that Coatnim, when she sort of attaches herself to each of the protagonists, she will start calling them auntie or uncle, you know, sort of in the tradition. But there's sort of a thing that happens where she's like kind of bringing out the best in them. Like she starts calling Tiger Uncle Tiger, and he starts leaning into his softer side and being less of just like the super like masked bruiser, you know, stereotype. And it's true of all of the characters, except for Bubs, really, because I feel like she's encouraging people to change and improve, whereas for Bubs, it's just, hey, I kind of see you under there without needing to be told.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, because like mentioned, Bubs, you know, the rest of the crew didn't even know, and you know, it's not necessarily on Bubs to be open about it. Bubs can be as open about that as Bubs wanted, but at the exact same time, the introduction of this child and the introduction of someone who was immediately, I see you, I understand you, was enough to kind of give that. So there was still a change with Bubs. It was just not a change of ways. It was a, oh, this is what acceptance looks like, which was kind of like, that was really interesting.
And that's very Wizard of Oz too. Like the thing that you're missing is actually inside you all along, is the sort of arc of that. And I think it plays really well here. I'm curious, you know, the one side of this that I think we can't really see in the US is just sort of how this sort of movie with Bubs landed in, I guess, the mass sort of market for which it was made. I don't know. I sometimes like have flashes of like, if this were in every US theater, what would Reddit be like? Probably horrible. I don't know.
So the funny thing about that is that was the original intention. The reason why it ended up on Netflix is because of the pandemic. It was supposed to actually get released in theaters. And I was like, darn, I really would have loved to have seen this on a gigantic screen.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm sad.
Like, and I'm curious, because I brought this up with my chat with Nerd Caliber as well. Like, but how well do we think this would have done? I know, obviously, because Parasite, and this was brought up, like Parasite winning the Academy Award, and so people are a lot more interested and in tune on, like, okay, this is a Korean film. This is a, like, we're more familiar. We as Americans are more familiar with this cinema now. Like, I'm curious how it would have done. Like, I don't know.
And I'm sure like some of that probably would have had to do with like distribution issues, like how broadly would it actually have been shown. But I do think it would have been interesting to see how people reacted to it and how many people went to see it. I mean, Snowpiercer also did well.
Yeah.
So maybe there would have been some sort of, you know, people would have been interested because there's been more Korean film coming to the US as sort of mainstream. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, like, would the prevailing sort of opinion of the ending be like, oh, haha, that robot sounds like a girl or whatever it looks like I mean, that which obviously is not the type of conversation we're having about it. I just wonder if that would be the read, sort of the popular read, like it's a joke or something. I hope not.
No, and actually, Jonathan, you bring up a really good point. I know earlier I brought up the idea that, like, oh, you know, there are no jokes about this character because they're, because Bubs has the voice that Bubs has, but is in a certain body, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, there is that, like, Bubs doesn't specifically change her voice at the end. And part of it, like, is, you know, she's figuring out what voice she wants. But when she talks to Dorothy, she says, like, oh, I like the voice you have.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just like that could still be read as like the joke of, here's the visualization of a hot lady who's got a man voice, for lack of better description. But at the same time, it is very much still kind of couched in this like real affirmation.
Yeah.
especially as a trans woman that has a deep voice and just doesn't care. It's like, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
And it's coming from, a kid. So like,
Right.
the quote unquote, the picture of innocence, like the person who doesn't have any baggage or anything associated with it, just saying like, I like your voice because it's yours.
Yeah, I definitely had a moment with that where I was like, you could sort of take this, or like personally, I could sort of be reminded of people being, family members and things sometimes will push back if you want to change something transition wise. And they're kind of like, but you're so beautiful, or you're so whatever it is that they think you are, and that you're going to, ruin. And there was a way that it could have been taken that way. And I think the fact that it was a small child and the same one who was the first one to see her, it kind of reminded me of like when you watch those conversations where like drag queens go to talk to little kids, and sometimes the little kids will spout back, homophobic or sexist things that they've clearly picked up from society. But it just doesn't feel the same as when it's an adult and when it feels very pointed and very real. It's more like, this is just where we are, and we can talk about these things, and it's a little bit more about experience. And she says, I like your voice, but it doesn't become this thing of like, no, don't change. I think, but I wasn't sure about that moment.
I mean, it kind of models dysphoria and kind of the complex discussions around dysphoria that happen, I think, pretty well. Like, it models a version of that. I think the sort of conversation around, oh, I can't have this voice because that's not what society tells me that this should sound like, versus the, okay, put that aside for a second and let's just ask, are you happy with that voice? And if the answer to that is actually yes, then there's no reason to change it. You're making changes to increase your own euphoria. Anything that doesn't do that is not necessarily, that doesn't need to be part of it. So I like that sort of modeling, and I like that it's maybe a little sticky, because it can be a little sticky to have those conversations. I know it's tough for me to look in the mirror sometimes and figure out, like, well, what do I want to change about myself? Well, I don't know. Like, is it something I'm changing for me? Is it something I'm changing for society? I don't, like, all of that information feels alive in that conversation at the end with Bubs and Dorothy.
Yeah. Yeah. We're at that part of the podcast where we're all just...
I can see it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Sylas, say that again.
Oh, I was just saying I could see that all of us were just like having a moment. We were having a lot of feelings, and just quietly for a second there.
Yeah. We're at the point of the podcast where if we really enjoyed the piece, we can really take it in, because we're not screaming about how much we hate it and how much stupid that is. This is no Dallas Buyers Club.
Right, yeah. See the Mrs. Doubtfire episode. You want that.
Yeah.
I kept thinking about like the enjoyment of actually watching like because the finale of the film, where they're all sort of, doing what they have to do and sort of in the climax of the film, the thing that I actually really loved so much was the fact that the two people defending the ship, it's Bubs and Jang, their captain. It was the two women who are like the bruisers, and it has nothing to do with their size, and it has nothing to do with like, it's just about the fact that these are the people with those skills on the crew. And I was like, good breaking the trope, break the trope.
Yeah.
Also, just to throw this out, not for nothing, Jang was hot. I was like, the entire time I was just like, oh, hi. Oh, I guess I found my type. Okay.
And also, like, she has that terrible, like, the guy who likes her is just like this very tall, long-haired French boy who is just very into her, and she has no time for it. And I was like, yes. Yeah. More of this.
Yeah.
The other thing is, because correct me if I'm wrong, they don't end up together.
No.
Do they? Yeah.
No, it's like, you can help me because you like me, and I'll just take
you
that.
can hang out. And you have to do what I say whenever you hang out.
Right.
And you know that that's what you're, and he's never like, oh, I've been friend zoned, or oh, I'm not getting what I want out of this. He's like, yes, you're right, I am very lucky to be in your presence.
Yeah. And beyond that, he barely gets lines, which I love. I mean, it's like, yeah, show your appreciation and go off in your own little movie or whatever.
Go play the guitar. Do your thing. Oh. Yeah. I also, there was like something about, and I keep calling her Dorothy because I'm terrible with names, and I remember that she was Dorothy. There's just something about Dorothy when they're first introduced to her, and they think that she is this giant nuclear bomb that could go off at any moment, which is hysterical. But I also like totally like, because again, when I go into a piece and I know that I'm doing it for the podcast, I have to play Who's the Trans, and I was just like, is this kid the trans? Is this what Jonathan wants me to say? I don't understand. Like, is it because they all think that this kid is going to explode? Like, what? Oh, it's the robot.
All trans people are about to explode. We know this.
It's like, I mean, it's one of the many secrets of trans folk is that we could explode at any moment. It's just we
You heard
choose
it
not
here.
to. Yeah.
That and we love to color. That's
Coloring and explosions. These are the things that we do.
Both very therapeutic in different ways.
Yeah.
The only true binary.
But there was this like real like feeling that I got from this idea of like this child is a dangerous weapon and she's just being a child. She's just trying to exist. It's just like, and then especially finding out she's not a danger at all and she gives a bunch of life. She gives a bunch of life. She gives life.
No, I like a bunch of life.
So much life.
Just so much life. Oh, but yeah, like it felt really, I don't know, like it spoke to me in a way that I wasn't expecting it to.
Yeah, and it works really well in contrast with the villain of the story who makes himself into this massive hologram to tell everybody how beneficial he is and how wonderful he is and how much he's going to improve everybody's lives. And for all his talk, it doesn't matter. Like, she's the actual one who has the true power in the story. And I love that.
I also I wanted to create there's probably more of them, but I had a really sharp reaction to that, the big giant hologram.
Yeah.
Because that's a trope in science fiction. We've seen it more than once.
Oh yeah.
The Master does it in Doctor Who, Horde Prime does it in She-Ra, and I'm like, so this is a thing. Like when you're a megalomaniac, you're like, oh, giant hologram. It's the size of a skyscraper. You all have to listen to me.
Yeah. And again, in The Wizard of Oz, it's a big giant head.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful, like, I was like, okay, so this is, I want the compilation. I want to put it on YouTube.
What's the song you would set that to? I don't even know.
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm going to go back to
Everybody
that one.
wants to rule the world?
Yeah. It's the end of the world and we know it or something.
Yeah.
It's got to be REM is what I'm hearing. Yeah. Here in the place where you work. I really love this whole like evil Elon Musk. Like, there's just something about this character, and I forget the name of the actor. I know that he's a famous American actor.
Richard Armitage.
He does this character to perfection. Like, it's just like, this could be a very stock character that's just like, yeah, oh, okay, I'm evil. But like the way he does the evil is just so, you can tell he's having a good time. You can tell he's put his work into it. It's just like, yeah.
I mean, there's something so delightfully fun about this where they're like, yeah, the characters are big, larger than life, or Richard Armitage is going to chew the scenery this whole time. We're going to give him a weird skin thing that we never explain. It's just like coded villain stuff. And the movie is talking about all these serious themes, but it's also like grand and unapologetically ridiculous. Whereas a lot of the science fiction we're doing now is trying to pass itself off as really serious. And then the ridiculousness, Palpatine, you're just like, it would be okay if you just were doing it, but you think you're doing something clever, whereas they're doing something clever, but they're also like, it's just silly. We don't know. Mm-hmm. Enjoy yourself.
Like, imagine
Space.
how different Rise of Skywalker would have been if they had just been like, yeah, Palpatine's coming back, and we know that's silly. Like, if they just owned that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Absolutely.
what? It's like, well, I'm here now.
Yeah. He's just sitting there, like, around his table with all of his clones, and they're eating.
Yeah, like a
like,
Tomax
You
and
didn't see
Samon
this
situation from
coming.
G.I. Joe. They're all just there. One's got a
Exactly.
scar.
It's very Skeletor. He's just,
Trust me, Skywalker, no one is as confused or surprised as I.
I just ran out of ideas. I don't know.
Get me my 50-foot tall hologram.
That's right, Snoke, too.
that was Snoke.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Holy
is what we do. Well, and that was, it's even funnier because I remember when The Force Awakens came out and they showed that the Snoke thing, they tried to tell us that he was really that big.
Yeah, like I would have been down for 50-foot tall
Right?
evil.
And that was in the news. I think someone had interviewed Andy Serkis or something happened and someone revealed, they're like, no, he's actually 50 feet tall. And I was like,
Yeah.
really?
I joined the dark
Okay.
side just from being pissed from hitting my head on so many doors. So I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go evil.
Yeah,
Did you
but
see
then
my
they took
fourth
it back.
email?
That's where he got all those scars. Like thwack.
And then they took it back and you were like, oh no, he's just another one of the squad.
Right.
Making fun of holograms.
Right.
I am in a chair and easily dispatched, but please don't. We have another movie after this. Oh. So Space Sweepers.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. No, hey, I could talk Star Wars all day. I know, Emmett, you could talk Star Wars all day.
Don't let me.
And they do.
Don't tell everyone.
I could participate in that. I'm looking around for. Oh, hey, wait. There we go. I do have one for that too. There's a little
nice.
Luke Skywalker there.
Once
But-
again, you'll never get to see it unless you join
I
our
know.
But yeah, no, hey, our Patreon subscribers will. They're going to see this thing
Yes.
that Miles is holding up. You don't know what it is. Could it be a
This
banana?
is Emmett's. Yes, it's a
Oh.
secret.
Yeah.
No.
Back to the discussion.
I just want to participate in the toy thing.
Cool. I got
That was good.
ponies. That's what I got. I got Sailor Venus. My wife bought me Sailor Venus. Anyway, this is the beauty of the live stream, y'all. So
The pandemic's been really hard on us.
Yeah.
the other thing that I really loved about this movie, this is like a 2-hour-ish movie. Like it was like 2 hours and some change, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it did not feel like that.
No.
Mhm.
And the script is so tight. Like I'm very impressed at when because often when they're like, this movie's 2 hours and 15 minutes, you're like, uh-oh. and not because I don't like long movies, but because you're like, what weird stuff did you do to make this movie? Like, when it's episode 1 should not have been 2.5 hours going
No.
back to Star Wars. But like you get Space Sweepers, and I was like, okay, like what are we gonna get? Are we gonna get too many action sequences? Like way too many action sequences? Like are we gonna what are we gonna get overloaded on that shouldn't have been there?
Yeah.
And there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's so tight. It's really well conceived. There are lots of things that come back, like little shout outs that the world building's pretty complex. Like they don't waste it. They go like, okay, if the movie's going to be close to 2.5 hours, there's going to be a reason for it to be close to 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, from really the first scene, I had the feeling of like, oh, I could live in this world. Like I could just live, I could exist in this world as long as they want to show it to me. I'm fine. And that's, I think, the feeling you want to target when you're going for that kind of movie, not trying to like buy my attention with these like action scenes that are just empty calories, but like actually making me want to exist there. And I did.
Yeah. No, and that's how you can tell you got good world building is when you are sitting there, you're absorbed in it. And space opera, does this count as space opera? I don't know. I never know. Things are really weirdly like rigid.
Some genres are fake, but
Yeah.
we do them anyway.
Yeah. Like, it's what I would describe as a space opera. And space operas are very hard to get the world building down because it's so vast, and so like you need to like, oh yeah, well you in your head know that this alien can do 50 backflips, but you know that's a surprise to your audience. It's like,
yeah, I think, and they do a good job with like the tiny things that, you know, like I mean I think that there's a thing that happens in good space opera where there are like a couple various things that you can do to make world building happen quickly and easily. And I think that it's like gambling, food, where people sleep. And that's like 90% of what you need to know about space operas are usually just in those details.
Yeah.
Like, how do people eat and what are they eating? Where do you go to sleep? And like, how do you gamble or drink or...
Yeah. Usually it has nothing to do with space and nothing to do with operas.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like one of the best parts of that movie is when they're selling all the tomatoes.
Yeah.
Like, there we go. That's what you want. Those moments.
Yep. Exactly.
So is there anything else that we haven't discussed? We're getting to the point where we should start wrapping up and start asking the questions that we always ask. I'm going to say that's probably a no, but if something pops up while we're answering those questions,
yeah,
we have a little bit of time, so we can go ahead and deviate from the questions. But y'all know the questions. Y'all have been on this podcast before. Admittedly, Emmett, you and I have never done a show together. You jumped in on you jumped in when I needed some folks, and luckily Sylas and you stepped up to help while I was out in Scotland maybe a year or two ago. So this is the first time you and I have been on a show together. But so the questions that we always ask, is it transphobic and is it enjoyable? I think people already know the answer to one of those questions. So let's go ahead and lead with that. Was it enjoyable? This could be a scale of 1 to 10. This could be a noise. This could be a physical action that people will have to join our Patreon to see. Who wants to go first?
There we go. Sylas is doing action.
Oh, yeah, that is a good action right there.
If you're not Patreon, you'll never know what I thought of the movie. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say on the Dorothy fart meter, it's like the deep, like internal, like middle of the night, just all of that just flowing right out of you like a foghorn. Just a beautiful little foghorn that lasts for a while.
This is the quality content that people come to this podcast for. just to clarify, that is a good thing, correct, Jonathan?
Of course, absolutely. Oh, have you ever been in the middle of the night and had a really big fart? It's awesome.
Hey, Emmett, how did you feel about this piece?
No, I just really wish that I could have farted on cue. but since I can't,
just trying to destroy my podcast.
We're trying to improve your podcast.
Yeah. That's definitely what the people want.
Sure.
I think that on a scale, but my scale is I want to be wrapped in Bubs's pink sweater. That's what I want.
Oh,
Bubs's sweatshirts?
Yeah. The sweater at the end,
Quality.
which is like the most accurate piece. I was like, I know so many trans women who would wear this exact sweater. Yeah. This is good. This is a good costuming choice, and the person who animated it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to emphatically agree. I think, I loved this. This was so like, honestly, it was so surprising to me. I was kind of putting it off. I was putting it off so much because I was like, "What is this? Are they janitors? I don't know."
Yes, I mean, kind of.
I mean, like people I respect are saying that this is amazing, but like, I don't know if I'm here for space janitors right now. And it was just like, oh. Yeah, no, this was good. I'm glad that I took the time. So, is it transphobic?
No, I don't think it's transphobic. I think that, like, basically everything, it exists in an imperfect transphobic world. So, not everything is going to work. Not everything comes back. But there was nothing in it where I was like, the person who made this had a transphobic thought, intended a transphobic, or even just sort of wasn't trying to be negative, but didn't think it through.
Yeah. That's where I land too. I mean, I think that it in and of itself is not a transphobic movie. I think that does not absolve it from criticism. But I think that exactly what Sylas said is accurate. 100%.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think that it's the one thing that I really think would have made a difference is if they had been able to get a trans woman to voice Bubs, because then you would have had some actual
Yes.
trans representation in the film.
Yep.
But again, like it's certainly not a story that's intending to do harm. It's intending to open people's minds and to, yeah, I mean, the whole movie is very much about just telling people to love each other and be kind to each other overall. So she's no exception.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I fall on a similar scale. I think that to me there is still, I don't think it's transphobic. I'm just going to state that. But like I do think that there is something to any piece of media that is like, oh, the only trans character is a non-human, is just sort of like, okay, like we see it all the time. I think that I will be a lot more relaxed about that once we start getting more human trans characters represented, and we're starting to see that, but at the exact same time, and just to kind of acknowledge it, if that actor, and I do not know the actor that played Bubs, I do not know his work, but if he comes out later and actually says like, oh, I'm trans, then all the more better. But at the same time, this actor is not an out trans actor, and for a lot of these roles, priority really does need to go to out trans actors. And again, like we're talking about different cultures, different casting procedures right now. This is a truth to get more trans actors in the room, just in general. It needs to go out to people that are out and open because we don't often get to play anything but those characters if we're even considered for them. I'm very much like, I just wanted to make sure that was like stated explicitly.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I mean, I think that also in this movie, you know, there's a lot of ladies and gentlemen being said, right? Yet we're meant to envision a world that is theoretically at least more gender open. So they, them pronouns, neo pronouns, right, would probably be a thing. So I think that if you are crafting a world that's meant to embrace transness and be gender inclusive and gender expansive, then you need to sort of work in some of those elements as well into the world.
Yeah. And I do think that I think that there's this is one of the things where the issues where being a film as opposed to being a longer story can actually cause some issues, because I do think that the part of the reason that you're not going to see as much of it in the world that we see is because it is so clearly being controlled by people with a very specific idea of what being a good human is. And they are very, I mean, that the big issue with Richard Armitage's, you know, character Sullivan and the fact that he keeps offering people this choices to like prove whether or not they're actually good people. And it's a catch-22. He's the person with all the power telling someone in an impossible situation that they've made the wrong choice. So I do think that it makes sense that the world that we're seeing maybe hasn't caught up in so many ways because they are being overseen by people who aren't accepting at all, who are really awful and definitely want to control what humanity should look like. But you're not going to quite get that across the same way in a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. All right. Sequel. Pace Sweepers, yeah. Space Sweepers 2, The Ballad of Bubs. I'm here for this.
Yes.
Right?
Perhaps even a squeakquel to steal from Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, which have nothing to do with this.
No more squeakquels ever.
A Tale of Two Kitties, perhaps.
I am the trans Killjoy. That is the one that is not Margaret Killjoy. So
all I know is I love it.
Bubs in the City.
Hey,
I'm here for Bubs in the City.
There
you go.
I got to put my foot down on squeakquels.
Okay, sure. It's your podcast.
I have the power. I tell you what's good. This is the thing.
Yeah.
Many will tell you that's exactly how it goes. I am the Rich Armitage. My giant hologram.
Could you just not leave it on so late? I mean, we're trying to sleep.
Exactly. It's very bright
It's bright
and imposing.
Hologram screaming hologram screaming goes.
Oh, it screams now? Great.
Oh,
Well, okay, I'll look forward to that at 2 a.m.
I try getting to sleep without it now. You don't even know. You wake up and be like, oh, I missed that. Like a jackhammer outside your apartment. Suddenly it's like, oh, I miss it.
I've literally never had that thought, but okay.
So, Jonathan, tell people how to find you on the internet if you want them to.
Sure. So I'm on Facebook as Jonathan Alexandratos. I'm on Instagram as @toy_circus. That's all toy photos all the time. You can read my stuff on toywizards.com. That's toy-wizards.com. I'm also on tor.com and other places, and Twitter @jalexan.
All right. Sylas, you're up.
You can also find my work on tor.com. You can find me on Facebook, Sylas Barrett, and on Instagram and Twitter @thatsyguy. SY.
All right. And Emmet.
I'm also on. Everyone's on tor.com. Go to tor.com. And on various social media platforms, my username is usually use_the_force_MEM. That's why we talk so much about Star Wars.
I mean, you like Star Wars, right? That's a thing that you like.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I've never heard of it before.
Oh, okay.
I really like Captain Picard.
Yeah, I love that guy. I love Gandalf.
Yeah.
So yeah, for us, obviously at Is It Transphobic, you can find that for Twitter, you can find that for Instagram, you can find the more information on isittransphobic.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Lucretia Dearfor, LucretiaDear, and then the number 4. You cannot find me on Tor.com, but I don't know, let's change.
Really? Yeah, we'll fix that.
I'll write something.
Yeah, we're gonna fix that.
Hey, it's weird. It'll be my Tor.com. Cool. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for watching if you're watching the video. And thank you for listening. If you're not watching the video, please go to patreon.com/isitransphobic. We may do more of these. If you liked this, let us know. Tell us. Talk to us. Tell me. I listen. I look at all the comments. I see the Twitter. I see when people are tagging us saying like, hey, I listened to this cool podcast and they say this. Because that happened recently, and I was just like, all right. Using us to talk about things. Again, this is the stuff that would normally get cut out, but it's not because I'm live.
It's working.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Is It Transphobic was produced, edited, and coordinated by Ashley Lauren Rogers.
The original music you heard was all created by Vivian Aladrin, who you can find on Bandcamp at vivianaladrin.bandcamp.com.